Hello, symbol lovers, and welcome to another edition of Understanding the Symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. We've been looking at the temptation of Saint Anthony, and we'll be looking at the Garden of Earthly Delights as well, and we'll be comparing several symbols that they have in common. And we'll be figuring out these symbols by using our now 6 keys for understanding the symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. And we will be looking at the symbols of frogs, birds, dead trees, Saul of Tarsus, Paul, fruit, and egg. So we're going to begin with read the Bible, and we're going to read from the book of Revelation in order to define our frogs. It says, I saw 3 unclean spirits that look like frogs coming out of the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. These are demonic spirits that perform signs and go out to all the kings of the earth to assemble them for the battle on the great day of God the Almighty. These drawings are not by Bosch, by the way. These are from illuminated manuscripts, from whence Bosch learned the art of combining symbols. So does Bosch have any frogs coming out of people's mouths? Yes, he does. In The Conjurer, he has the big strong man so fascinated by the trick that not only does he lose his purse, but he even has a frog coming out of his mouth. So frogs are the words or ideas of the false prophet. So now we'll use the 6 keys to understanding the symbols of Hieronymus Bosch to understand the Conjurer. Right off the bat, it's exactly what it looks like, but may not be what it seems. It seems to be a magician performing a trick for a big man, and someone is picking the big man's pocket. So that's what it seems like. But to figure out what it really is, we need to read the Bible. And this is a little bit tricky, but the scripture you want to find is, how can anyone enter a strong man's house and steal his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can plunder his house. And so this is an illustration of Matthew 12:29. We see the strong man, we see that he is being robbed of his possessions, and we see that it isn't his house that has been captured, it is his mind that has been captured and is being controlled, diverted, dissuaded by the magician. So the magician and the thief are in cahoots together against the strong man. And this is an example of what I call the same but different. Everything in Bosch symbolism is the same but different from what it looks like, just as this painting is the same but different from Matthew 12:29. So now we're going to look at this painting, but we're going to think like an Ebionite. And so who is the trickster, the thief, the villain in the Bible? For Ebionites, it is of course Paul. And wouldn't you know, in 2 Corinthians 12:16, Paul tells us he's a crafty trickster. And so that is how Bosch has painted him. And because we know there is no such thing as magic, even though this magician seems to be bringing live frogs out of someone's mouth who's in the audience, we know he's merely a trickster. This makes the big man the trusting followers of Jesus who get tricked and they get robbed. And this makes the robber the Christian clergy. So the real trick here is making the words of the false prophet come out of the people. It's the people that are being fooled, but they're repeating the words of the false prophet, the frog. And this is more or less the same theme we have with the temptation of Saint Anthony on the inside panel. We have the frog, the words of the false prophet, and he's holding up an egg, a promise of metamorphosis. and it's being exchanged for gold. And instead of a big strong man, the congregation of true followers of Jesus is represented as the bride in the shimmering white gown. But it's all the same. It's a betrayal for money using a story of metamorphosis. And lest you think I'm being too harsh on the church and the clergy, don't forget how Bosch has portrayed them in the outside panels of The Temptation of Saint Anthony, and how the harsh treatment of the people by the clergy contrasts with gentle Jesus in the background. And all through Bosch paintings, you see the toad people and the frog reappearing over and over again. And it's never nice, and it always means the same thing. These are people and ideas and things that have been contaminated by the teachings of the false prophet, and of course the false prophet was Paul. As a counterbalance to the frog, the heretics have the birds. And the birds are master heretics who are accomplished in defeating the arguments of the Antichrist. So these good birds are devouring frogs under the watchful eye of Jesus in the Garden of Eden. And this big bird is not only devouring the frogs, but she's going to feed them to her young. So this is a super heretic and likely a self-portrait of Bosch himself. He is not only a debater of the false prophet's teachings, but he teaches others. So this is a portrait of the artist gleefully teaching a class of heretics how to destroy Paul. Next, we'll define the dead tree, and we'll do that by reading the Bible from Matthew, the 7th chapter, verses 15 through 20. Beware of false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, by their fruit you will recognize them. So now we're going to link up our images of Paul here in the Temptation of Saint Anthony, where we can easily identify him as the man in the basket with the tendency towards violence. And so he is associated with the false prophet, the ravenous wolves, and the dead tree that produces no fruit. In the Garden of Earthly Delights, we have in the right-hand panel, which depicts the daily life of Hieronymus Bosch, in the center of the daily life of Hieronymus Bosch, we find the dead tree of Christianity dominating everything. And this dead tree has a hollow egg in the tree. It's not, eggs don't grow on trees. They get laid in nests in trees, and the nest has rotted away. It was so long ago, and whatever was in the egg has hatched out and left this shell. But looking over at the rest of the Garden of Earthly Delights, what do we see? Well, what we see is the opposite of dead trees. We see fruit, 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 which is what you would expect to see in paradise. And that's what you see in the heretic's paradise. To be clear, fruit is good, fruit is joy, fruit is abundance, fruit is pleasure, fruit is reward, fruit is what we're working towards. And so if you're trying to figure out the central panel on your own, just remember fruit is good. It's the opposite of sin. On the other hand, we have the church. And never forget that among the bad fruit of Christianity were tens of thousands of murders, were the burning of witches, homosexuals, Jews, and heretics. That is merely the worst of the bad fruit of Christianity. But we are not here to quibble about who killed who way back when. We are here to explain the egg really, really quick. And the egg, which is at the dead center of the Garden of Earthly Delights, is a symbol of metamorphosis. You can tell what type of metamorphosis the egg represents by looking at the surrounding symbol. This metamorphosis is being held up by a toad, a symbol of the false prophet. So therefore, it cannot be a good metamorphosis. Not to mention the fact that it's being traded for money. The egg in this case is transubstantiation, the lie put forth by the false prophet, the toad, who we have identified as Saul of Tarsus, Paul. So the transformative idea in this egg being presented is, well, transubstantiation or Holy Communion, the central ceremony of Christianity. So this egg originated with that frog, Paul. But not all eggs are the same. The egg at the center of the Garden of Earthly Delights has a completely different meaning. And you can tell a lot by the meaning of this egg, by how it's being treated and what surrounds it. And once again, the most obvious thing is fruit, fruit, fruit. But there, if you look around, there are like no oppressors. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves, basically. This looks like a happy party. And so that tells us a little bit about what's at the center. And you can also tell a little by how they're treating it. When someone balances something on their head in Bosch symbolism, that means that they've mastered it. Another aspect of the egg is that of hope. And so this poor soul is keeping hope alive, even though he is in the hell on earth that is the life of Hieronymus Bosch under Christianity. Notice what's in the hollow egg that lies at the center of Bosch's world. And even though around it is hell on earth, inside the egg is a cozy, welcoming tavern. There's even a place at the table for you. But in order to get there, you have to follow the straight and narrow path, otherwise known as a ladder. So you have to follow the Sermon on the Mount to get to the cozy tavern of refreshment at the heart of Bosch's world. And in Bosch symbolism, a hollow egg such as this can transport you from one place to another. I'll spare you the theology and simply tell you that the transformative idea at the center of the Garden of Earthly Delights is do to others as you would have them do to you. This is the idea that separated the Christian church from heretics like Bosch. So what Bosch is saying is we need to listen to Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount and turn our backs on the dead tree of Christianity and begin to enjoy the fruits of heresy. Thanks for watching.